If the time stops at 1:09 a.m., roll over and pray that they think you're asleep. The title says it all. If you're wondering who they are, well, that's the strange part. It's your family, roommate, or whatever. I've never heard of this happening before, so I'm not sure what I can do about it. Other than pretending I'm sleeping, of course. That's the only thing that seems to keep them docile. Let me explain what's been happening in a little more detail. This has been going on for the past 3 nights now. I didn't think much of it the first night, because I honestly thought my family was pulling some prank on me. That is until last night when I was attacked by my wife. The first night was a pretty early night for my wife Kelsey and my twin boys Eric and Aaron. All of us were out cold by 9 p.m. We had a pretty long day of splitting wood to stock up for the upcoming winter. That night I woke up to an odd silence in the house. Like everyone had left and I was alone in the house. I grabbed my phone and checked the time, 1:09 a.m. I rolled over just to check if my wife was still sleeping, and when I found the bed empty, I sat up and looked around. The house was pitch black other than the hall light by my boys' room we left on, and with that dim light, I could see 3 shadows cast along the hallway wall as my bedroom was left open. "Kelsey?" I groggily called out. I could see all 3 shadows twitch at the sound of my voice, like they were startled. "Kels?" I called a little louder. This time a shiver was sent down my spine as all 3 heads of the shadows looked in my direction. "What the fuck?" I whispered to myself, tossing the blankets off from me as I got up to investigate. I tiptoed to my door with a feeling of unease growing in the pit of my stomach. Once I got to the door, I peeked around and was pretty creeped out at what I saw. Kelsey and the boys were standing still as statues with their bodies turned towards the boys' room, their necks, however, strained to stare directly at me. Huge smiles that looked painful to maintain plastered on all of their faces. "What the hell are you guys doing?" I asked with a chuckle, thinking they were playing a joke on me. Now that I think back, it didn't make much sense thinking they were joking. After all, why would they get up in the middle of the night for that with no guarantee I'd even wake up? Their bodies made an unnatural twitch at the sound of my voice, which made me jump back in surprise. This was when I started to think something might be wrong. A feeling of dread washed over me and I began to sweat. Then the sound of the clock on the microwave beeping as if it reset rang through the house made me jump in the air, and I let out a startled yelp. My boys turned instantly and walked back into their room, Kelsey doing the same. Her smile disappeared and she walked by me like a zombie and crawled back in bed, snoring as if she were sleeping the whole time. Confused as hell, I walked back to my side of the bed and checked the time on my phone. "What the?" I said to myself as I noticed the time. 1:10 a.m. No way, only a minute had passed since I first woke up. It had to have been at a very minimum of 5 minutes. Still, though, I shook it off and got back into bed, deciding to bring it up to Kelsey in the morning. The next morning I woke up and everything was back to normal. I could hear the boys playing in the living room and smelled bacon and eggs as Kelsey cooked breakfast. I got up and walked out with a smile as I remembered their little joke from the night before. "Good morning, pranksters," I said with a laugh. They all stared at me with a confused look on their faces. "Huh?" my wife finally said. "Last night? Are all of you standing in the hallway smiling at me?" Gotta admit, it was a good one, creeped me out a little bit. I said, shaking my head. "Ryan, don't even joke like that. You know those creepy smiling people stories freak me out." Kelsey scolded. "Hey, you're the one trying to freak me out in the middle of the night." I laughed. "By the way, how in the hell did you get the phones to stop time at 1:09? That was a good touch." My whole family was looking at me like I was a nut job. Then simultaneously they all started shouting it wasn't funny and that I was scaring them. I was bewildered. I didn't know if they were still in on the joke or if somehow they had all been sleepwalking. That wouldn't explain the time though. "Okay," I shouted. "I must have been having a damn dream, Jesus Christ. Don't freak out on me, damn." I turned and walked back into the room more confused than ever. I knew I wasn't dreaming. Were they this serious about their little prank, or did they not remember? Either way, I figured I'd settle it that night. I'd simply record them with my phone if they tried it again. That'd ruin their little joke pretty quickly. Satisfied with my plan, I went about my day. The boys helped split and stack more wood while Kelsey did some running in town. Before I knew, it was nighttime again and we were all in bed. I made sure to have my phone charged and right next to me, ready to catch them in the act. Once again, I woke up hours later, and that same eerie silence filled the house. This time my adrenaline started pumping as the feeling of dread hit me like a ton of bricks. I grabbed my phone and lit the screen up. 1:09 a.m. I tried to switch it to record, but my phone was frozen. Fuck. I whispered and yelled. I looked over to the hall and saw the same shadows as the night before. This time, a little closer. My blood ran cold as I noticed out of the corner of my eye that the TV was left on, but the picture was frozen. It seemed all electronics were frozen or something, adding to the creepy feeling that engulfed my body. I got up once again and tiptoed to the door. I peeked my head around and had to cover my mouth to stifle a yelp. Kelsey and the boys were standing facing me directly this time, only somehow their smiles even bigger than before. Now that they were a good 5 feet closer, I could see just how wide open and bloodshot their eyes were. When I moved my hand to cover my mouth, all three of them took a giant step forward. Naturally, I took a step back. They mimicked another huge step forward. This time, since Kelsey was bigger than the boys, she stepped ahead. She was now maybe 3 to 5 feet away, her eyes opening even wider as she looked extremely excited. I turned around to jump back in bed, and as I did so I heard loud booming as they gave chase. I felt huge blows hit my back, far harder than any of them should be able to inflict. What the fuck? I shouted as my back ached from the impact. I was now in bed and I yanked the covers over my head. Childish, I know, but hey, I wasn't about to strike my wife. Thankfully, as I lay still, the blows stopped and I heard heavy breathing from what I assumed was Kelsey, only it sounded way too deep and raspy. Then the breathing stopped altogether and silence filled the room. I know you're not asleep. She whispered so fast I barely made out what she said. Just then the beeping of the microwave filled the house and the TV resumed. I heard the sound of soft footsteps leave the room as the boys went back to their rooms, followed by pressure next to me in bed as Kelsey climbed back under the covers. I quickly grabbed my phone and checked the time, 1:10 a.m. This didn't make any fucking sense. I did my best to go back to sleep, but needless to say, I didn't sleep much. I tossed and turned as I tried to figure out what in the hell was happening. I tried to figure out what steps to take next. The only thing I could think of was to pretend I was asleep next time, since my lack of movement seemed to stop the blows. If they thought I was asleep altogether, maybe they'd just stand creepily in the hallway? It was worth a shot, I guess. I'll update you tomorrow and let you guys know how last night went for me. It was still extremely scary, but hey, I didn't get attacked, so that's a start, right? I've got another plan for tonight too, but I'll just put that in the update tomorrow. Wish me luck, and if anyone's got any ideas as to what to do here, please feel free to help. You're going to notice a woman in your home. You must ignore her. It was December of 1999 when she infested our quiet, Midwestern home. My father called for me from downstairs. I assumed it was time for dinner. He was standing at the bottom of the stairs and had his hand up to keep me from coming down. The moment I saw the panic in his eyes, I knew something was wrong. I want you to listen to me very carefully. He spoke. My heart started to race as he continued. It's very important that you keep your eyes on me. You're going to notice someone else in our home, but you must ignore her as much as possible. I almost started laughing. My 12-year-old mind trying to comprehend what he was getting at, assuming this was some sort of out-of-character joke. Before I could respond, he continued. She's going to whisper things, follow you, and whatever else she can to get your attention. It's going to be very difficult, son, but you must never interact with her. I promise she will leave, but only if you pretend she isn't there and try not to think about her. Promise me." There were so many things I wanted to ask him, but I was too frightened and confused. I managed to spit out, "Okay, Dad. All right, come downstairs. It's time for dinner. Hurry, I've made her stronger just by telling you. But I had to. I can't afford you looking at her by mistake. Trust me. Now stay focused." He barked. I did as I was told and slowly crept down the stairs, keeping my eyes glued to my father's as he backpedaled into the kitchen. I felt the temperature drop significantly as I reached the first floor. I smelled a familiar, sickening, and sour scent in the air. It reminded me of the time a raccoon died in our wall and stunk up the house for a whole week. My father and I sat down at the table at the same time. My sister was across from me, her head hung and her eyes stared at the empty porcelain plate in front of her. My mother pulled a casserole out of the oven. Her eyes were swollen and tear-stained. I kept my focus on my family, but out of the corner of my eye, I could see a blurry mess of dark, matted hair and sickly, gray skin. There was no energy in the kitchen, drained of all the warmth and laughter that usually accompany our meals. My sister grabbed my knee under the table and whispered, "Can you see her too?" I nodded. "Quiet," my father hissed. The woman walked forward with wet, crackling footsteps. The smell was nauseating. She crept towards the table, stopping directly behind my sister, only a few inches away, and rested a decrepit hand on her shoulder. She winced in fear and stared at me. I immediately put my head down. My mother served our dinner, doing her best to pretend as if everything was okay. I could see my father clutching my sister's hand underneath the glass table in an attempt to keep her from completely losing it. My sister spent the entire dinner with the skeletal hand on her shoulder. Nearly inaudible whispers spewed from the woman's mouth and filled the room like white noise. And that's how we lived for months, doing our best to live a normal life despite the ever-present, unwanted guest. Even if we left the house, she was somehow able to follow us all. Whenever the four of us were in the car, she could be seen in the rearview mirror or standing on the side of the road. My parents didn't let anyone visit and never let us stay at friends' homes during the months of hell. We were able to whisper to one another when it was absolutely necessary to discuss her presence if she wasn't too close. My father made us promise to never tell anyone. That was the only way to quarantine her, the parasite of attention. We concluded that she infected a single household at a time, unable to be seen by anyone outside the home unless their mind had been tainted with knowledge of her existence. I learned a few years later that my father was the reason for her arrival. His sister, back in the 70s, had been infected by another and had followed my aunt into their home. In 1999, for whatever reason, my father struggled to keep the thought of her at bay. In turn, he brought her back into his life, and ours. We kept the promise of keeping her a secret from others, and it was the hardest thing we've ever done. All of us tried leaving the house as a group, and she followed. We couldn't bring ourselves to break our family apart. It was hardest for my mother, who was stuck alone with her while we were at school and my father was at work. Everything changed the day my mother broke. It was a snowy February night. We had finished dinner and my mother decided to go to bed early. She was sitting on their bed, making herself almost impossible to ignore. My mother couldn't take it. I heard her screaming from the bedroom, demanding that she leave us alone. My father sprinted upstairs to try and stop her. That was the last I ever saw my mother. A pool of blood on the white carpet was all that remained. The woman was still there, but my mother was gone. In the following weeks, she whispered to me. She told me I could see my mother again. All I had to do was look and ask how. I never did. The reason I am telling you is that I want you to think about her. I saw her again this morning for the first time in 18 years. I cannot afford to lose my wife or children to the parasite. I need you to think about her dark hair and gray skin. Think about her in your home so that she may leave mine. You're already infected, and eventually you're going to notice a woman in your home. You must ignore her. It's for your good. I'm so sorry. A 911 call where nothing made sense. Things were fucked from the beginning. A woman named Carol dials 911 and claims that somebody's inside her house. We go investigate, searching the place inch by inch, but find nothing. Usually, this could be easily explained away. The mind of an older person living alone eventually starts deteriorating. The onset of dementia and other mental issues start to take a toll on their lives. Quite sad, really. However, this woman is only 24. In other words, the probability of this all being inside her head is extremely unlikely. She also seemed to be terribly distraught by this whole situation. Why would she be acting? We leave her place and tell her to contact us if she sees anything again. I mean, we couldn't really do anything at that point. We were somewhat surprised when we got another call from her the very next day. We drive down there and search the house again. We find nothing, again. Problem is, the house seems different this time. Almost as if there were some subtle detail that made it a separate place from the one we were in yesterday. My partner, Beck, says that he noticed it as well, but doesn't quite understand what's wrong. We decide not to say anything about this as we tell Carol that we came up with nothing. However, she tells us to stay. I recorded him, she says. She takes out her phone and tells us to watch the video that she's pulled up. It was footage of her in the house. She's running around, breathing frantic. And then we see him. A large figure, covered head to toe in what appears to be a black bodysuit. He lumbers towards the camera as Carol screams and ducks into a room, locking it from the inside. There's a few bangs on the door before we can hear footsteps walking away. We don't know how to react to this footage, but we try anyways. We come to the conclusion that the man must have left once Carol got behind the door. However, the front door was locked when we came, and Carol told us that she hadn't left the room. Did he also have the keys to her house? That would explain a lot, but it also made this situation a lot worse. We decide to keep an eye on her house for the night. We're discreet, parking about a block down the road in an unmarked car. We're both fully awake, ready to go as soon as we see some sketchy shit. At around 2 a.m., we see somebody walking across the road towards her house. However, it isn't the man. It's Carol herself. Beck and I must have had the same look on our faces. What the fuck? We get out of the car and make our way over there, knocking hard on the front door. However, nobody answers. We can see lights flicking on and off intermittently, but we're not sure what that's supposed to mean. Was she trying to tell us to leave? We get a call from dispatch a few moments later. They're telling us that Carol has called 911 again, saying that there are now multiple people in her house. They ask if we need backup. We say yes. Without another moment of hesitation, we force the door open and barge in. The living room lights still flicker on and off, but we see the light switch and nobody is touching it. We call out for Carol, but nobody responds. In fact, the place is dead quiet. I can see the neighboring houses starting to turn on their lights from the commotion. We rush up the stairs and start sweeping each room. But there's nothing. Once again, we search the place inch by inch, but nothing is in here, not even Carol, who we clearly saw enter a few moments earlier. As I pace around in petrified confusion, Beck speaks up. There's rooms here that shouldn't be. What the hell are you talking about? I ask in response. I've been counting, he says. There were 9 total the last time we came. There are 10 now. You didn't notice it? I forced myself to think hard. Subconsciously, I knew that something was off, but couldn't pinpoint exactly what. However, I eventually realized. The basement. There was only door down there last time. Beck nods. 2 now. I don't know what to think. I look at my surroundings and try to make an assessment, but there's really none that can be made. We hear a knock on the door about 10 seconds later. It sounds agitated. We look out the living room windows, but aren't met with the red and blue police lights. We're hesitant to answer, of course. I decide to take a step forwards, but Beck pulls me back. He looks at me and shakes his head, whispering, "We left the door open, remember?" He was right. My radio starts crackling. Another call from dispatch. They're telling us that we need to leave the house immediately. That Carol called again, saying we were going to die, in a deathly monotone voice. The knocking has stopped, but we can hear footsteps in the basement. Something is in here with us. We've decided that this was enough. We needed to get the fuck out of here. As we start descending the steps, we hear a voice coming from the kitchen. Carol comes out, blocking our path to the door. She looks detached, with blank, beady eyes staring right at us. "Did you find him?" she asks, without any semblance of emotion in her voice. "I think he might be in the basement. Why don't you go check?" Beck and I are frozen in shock. She just keeps looking at us, gesturing towards the basement door every now and then. The footsteps down there sound like they're running in circles now. We ignore her request, abruptly brushing past her and bolting out of the front door. The backup still isn't here, so we decide to just get into our car. However, we see somebody down the street peering through our driver's side window. He's large, dressed in what appears to be a black full-body suit. He looks away from the window and directly at us. It's hard to tell from this far, but the suit doesn't seem to have any eye holes. Beck speaks up, "Sir, please step back from the vehicle." His voice cracks in the middle of the sentence. He's terrified. As soon as Beck stops talking, the figure starts running towards us. It's fast. Too fast. In the time that it takes for us to pull up our guns, we've realized that it's actually moved past us, into the house. We waste no more time, running into the car, locking the doors and waiting until backup arrives. When it finally does, we're extensively questioned while what appears to be a SWAT team searches the house. However, it isn't the police chief asking us. Instead, it's some guy in a suit that we've never seen before. He asks us things like how many doors were there in the house, and what did Carol look like exactly, and did we ever see a man with one eye wandering around? We answer inconclusively to pretty much all of them. We have no idea what the hell's going on. At one point, we see SWAT members carrying multiple stretchers outside and loading them into their truck. Not an ambulance, mind you, but their own truck. Eventually, the man who was questioning us tells us to go home and to report to our station as usual. He tells us not to worry about what we've seen here. I don't know how he expects us to do that. We drive back to the station in complete silence. As we park, Beck finally lets out a sigh. "Jack is fucking crazy, dude." I look at him in confusion. "What are you talking about? Who the hell is Jack?" He reciprocates an equally confused stare at me. "What the hell are you talking about?" "The dude who owns the house." "What?" "It was a lady named Carol." "How'd you forget already?" We hold each other's chaotic gaze for what feels like a minute, but we say nothing further. We both silently exit the vehicle and start heading our separate ways home. We both know that something's terribly wrong with the other. I try not to think about it too much as my head hits the pillow. I manage to drift off to sleep about 3 hours later, only to be woken up immediately by the telephone. Barely coherent, I answer it. "We need you." A woman dialed 911. Says that somebody's in her house. My heart sinks slightly. It sinks completely when he tells me the address. It's Carol's. I hang up the phone and slump into the bed. I just want this nightmare to end.